Do we have a consent calendar? So how many items do we have?
We have 3 items.
3 items. Okay, Councilman Krikorian is on his way. Councilmember Parks is busy with budget and finance. We have a relatively light agenda today, so let's, item number 1
Okay.
has to do with appointments and reappointments to members of the Workforce Investment Board. I've reviewed the summaries of the resumes of all of the candidates. I find that it's a very diverse, qualified team, and they certainly represent, I think, the diversity of interests that the Workforce Investment Board should have, and so I don't think we need to line each and every one up to suffer through a committee hearing and have me challenge them on the details. On the whole, I think it's a very talented professional body, so I'm happy to pass it on to City Council with recommendations. We're waiting for Councilmember Krikorian. Hopefully he'll concur on that. On item number 2.
Item number 2 is a communication for the Business Tax Advisory Committee relative to the City of Los Angeles business tax issues.
Do we have a verbal report, I understand?
Yes, Councilman John Wickham with the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst. And after your last meeting, when BTAC presented their 10 recommendations, your committee requested that the CLA work with BTAC members, Finance, CAO, to evaluate the recommendations made and report back to you. We are nearing completion of our report. It's been quite interesting, actually, tracking some of the legislative history on some of these items. It's been...
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. What was that?
There's actually legislative history on a number of these items that is important to the discussion, and so we're gathering that information. We'll have that available in our report back to you. We met with the various city departments and BTAC members to review these items in detail, which is a very productive and helpful conversation. And one of the things that came out of that discussion was a request that the Office of Finance prepare a chart comparing the time frames on a number of these recommendations. For example, BTAC was concerned about the statute of limitations on how far back can Office of Finance go in checking for unpaid taxes. And there are a number of situations that a taxpayer might be in. For example, they've registered with Finance, but they didn't pay their taxes, or they registered with Finance and they paid part of their taxes, or they've never registered with Finance and never paid any taxes. And each of those scenarios have different look-back periods. And so we were trying to get a handle on that, and so we asked Office of Finance to research that, lay it all out, compare what the city does against what the IRS does and what the Franchise Tax Board does and what the BTAC proposal is. That way we can have a clear understanding in each of these scenarios what we're trying to do and how we compare to the other organizations. A lot of the BTAC recommendations were trying to conform the city more to the IRS or the FTB and trying to simplify and clarify so that, everybody doesn't have their own rules. We're trying to, make things easier to understand. And so Office of Finance has prepared that chart, and it's very informative, very helpful, and I believe a copy of that has been distributed and passed out. So
when will the report be ready?
Your next meeting. We will have it ready for your next meeting.
Will we have time to absorb it before?
That's my intent, is to get it out in time so that
the time that you need to absorb something is far less than the time that I need to absorb something?
Yeah, we should be able to have a report out, released in a week or week and a half.
Yeah, if you could get it to us, give us a good week to absorb it, that would be very helpful.
Yeah. Of the 8, 2 of them were actually introduced by the Office of Finance into the mayor's fiscal 10-11
Some of
budget.
them have already been done.
Yeah, so 2, yeah.
But, and you have some that are conflicting with statutory law or something,
Yeah, yeah.
and some that might need a change to the ad code or the charter or other things, so.
Exactly.
So those would be the easiest ones to deal with, I think, at least in terms of whether or not we approve them immediately.
Exactly.
We obviously can't approve something that would require a charter change, although we may choose to initiate a charter change. That's
Exactly.
a whole different thing. Okay, Mr. Krikorian? I'm sorry,
Ed Cabrera, Office of Finance. I'm just at the table in the event that you would like me to give an overview as far as the chart that Finance prepared. Essentially, we looked at 3 areas, statute of limitations, the interest policies, as well as a BTAX proposal for a voluntary disclosure program. And what we did is we examined the best practices that the Internal Revenue Service at the federal level, the State Franchise Tax Board, as well as comparing that to our current city policies, and we put that in a chart in comparison to the BTAC proposals. So I can go through these items and give an overview if you would like.
Sure.
Sure. The BTAC proposal in regards to statute of limitations is such that they're proposing specific statute policy in 4 areas. The first one is if a taxpayer has registered with the city and they file a timely renewal on an annual basis. What they're proposing is that the statute of limitations be 3 years from the filing due date. Currently, for a taxpayer who has filed timely with the City of Los Angeles, the statute is 3 years. However, the trigger date is based on when the taxpayer's deficiency assessment becomes delinquent. What I mean by that is if a taxpayer pays on time and subsequently we conduct an audit and determine that there is additional tax due, a taxpayer has 30 days from the date of our deficiency notice to make payment. If the taxpayer fails to pay within that 30-day period, then they become delinquent and our statute will begin to run. So it is still a 3-year statute. However, the trigger date is different than the date that BTAC proposes.
How much of a difference? 30 days?
I'm sorry?
It's a 30-day difference?
Right. It basically would be 30 days after we've issued a deficiency assessment notice to the taxpayer.
No, but it's 30 days different than BTAC's proposal?
No, actually, it could be much longer. For example, if a taxpayer, our normal audit cycle is 3 years, so if a taxpayer files their 2008 renewal on time by February 28th of 2008, and we subsequently audit them, let's say in 2010, and they fail to pay their deficiency assessment within 30 days of notice in 2010, the trigger date would be the date of delinquency in 2010, and we would have 3 years to audit and assess and take any collection action. So the effective date could be much longer than what is currently proposed by BTAC. BTAC, it would essentially be 3 years from the date that the renewal was due. Our current situation is it could extend indefinitely pending our actual audit of that renewal period. In comparison, the Franchise Tax Board, the IRS has a 3-year statute from the date of filing of the renewal or their annual tax return. The Franchise Tax Board, it's 4 years from the date of filing, and the primary reason that the Franchise Tax Board has 4 years rather than 3 is they rely on making adjustments after the Internal Revenue Service notifies the Franchise Tax Board of any audit assessments that they make. So the Franchise Tax Board has 1 additional year, but theirs is based on the date of filing. So there is a significant difference in that regard to what our current practice is and what BTAC is proposing. In terms of taxpayers who have registered and filed late, it is still the same, 3 years from date of filing for the IRS. 4 years from the date of filing for the Franchise Tax Board. Our policy still is the same, 3 years from the date the taxpayer is delinquent on a deficiency assessment. And BTAC is proposing something consistent with ours that would be 3 years from the date of filing as well. As far as a taxpayer who is registered and does not file, the IRS has no limitation, so they can go back indefinitely. That is the same policy with the Franchise Tax Board. It would be no limitation. Our limitation is 3 years from the date the taxpayer became delinquent, and we've issued a delinquency assessment. BTAC is proposing 6 years statute of limitation from the filing due date. So that would be actually an increase of 3 years on top of what the city currently.
Maybe I'm having a problem here. What exactly are they filing?
The renewal, the annual business tax renewal and payment of their tax.
Okay, so So 3 years from the date the taxpayer is delinquent on payment of their renewal fees?
Correct. The trigger date based on state law is when a taxpayer becomes delinquent either on their annual renewal or when they become delinquent on an audit assessment notice that we issue to the taxpayer based on an audit.
Why would you need a statute of limitations if they're timely?
If they're timely, we would need it because they could underreport.
They could what?
They may not report accurately. They could underreport and underpay their liability. So in that event, if we conduct an audit, we would need a certain amount of time in order to go through our assessment and collection process.
How long does that take?
The collection and assessment process, well, that depends on how soon we audit them. We normally have a 3-year audit cycle. So a taxpayer may file a renewal, and depending on the audit cycle, we may not audit until 2 to 3 years down the road based on our normal process. Once we issue an assessment, we normally allow 45 days before we refer it to our collection unit, and then we process it over.
Okay, so herein lies the problem. They don't think they're getting audited fast enough. In other words, if you take forever to do the audit, then they will have a liability down the road that they might forget about.
Well, understood. However, there's over 400,000 taxpayers located in the city. We audit approximately 7,000 taxpayers in a given tax year. So we have a best practices where we try to identify those taxpayers that are underpaying, and we basically have our workload on an audit program where we try to identify those underpayments as quickly as possible.
You can take 3 years to do an audit.
Not from the point that we start the audit.
No, so they file, and you don't do an audit for 3 years.
That is possible, correct.
And it takes how long to do the audit?
It could take anywhere from a couple of months to 6 months, depending on the complexity of the case.
Now we're at 3.5 years. And at that point, you assess, and you want the statute of limitation. That doesn't make sense to apply when they've been delinquent. I mean,
well,
once you determine the delinquency, it doesn't make sense to have a statute of limitations once you determine the delinquency. The whole point is that after 3 years, you can't find them delinquent.
If a taxpayer is delinquent, correct.
So you can only capture 3 years at any given point.
If a taxpayer is delinquent on their renewal, the city has 3 years, based on state law, to initiate action all the way through litigation to attempt to collect.
Okay. Well, you said standards and practices, but you've given 2 examples that are different than the city's policy.
I'm sorry.
You said that you've set your timeframe on the basis of standards and practices, but the two examples you give in the IRS and the Franchise Tax Board are different.
Right. Well, we, as far as the city, we have to adhere to state law based on the California Code of Civil Procedure that may not apply to the state agencies. So as a charter city, there are different provisions which apply to the city that allow us to utilize certain statute periods.
Okay. So you want to keep it the same, basically?
Oh, no, we're simply identifying what the various policies are at the federal, state, and the city level
Right now.
in comparison to BTAC. At this point, we're doing further analysis in terms of what they are proposing. We haven't identified a position.
You might be able to come up with something?
Well, that's based on the analysis that the CLA is doing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I get the next one. Registered and no filing, 6 years. Okay. It's the same thing. Why would they have 6 years? I mean, would you ever be in a circumstance where...
Well, currently our look-back period is 8 years. What BTAC is proposing for a business that has not registered, has not come forward and filed a renewal or registered with the City of Los Angeles, they're proposing 6 years. My understanding is what they're looking at is to try to provide an opportunity for taxpayers to come forward at an earlier point. I believe the 6 years is in conjunction with their proposal on the voluntary disclosure agreement, which has a 4-year look-back period.
Okay.
Well, if that's the case, what's the policy justification for having any limitation at all on non-filers? Wouldn't you want to have the additional leverage of being able, if businesses have not filed, they are outlaw businesses. These are not legitimate businesses who have filed, who have registered and are filing, or who have registered and for whatever reason failed to file. These are businesses that haven't registered, haven't filed. They're underground economy businesses that are outlaws. So why would we have any statute of limitations at all for businesses that are thumbing their nose at the way we do business, here, and the way we collect revenues from businesses, number one. And number two, wouldn't it create more incentive to have them voluntarily come forward under the voluntary compliance program if we did have an unlimited look-back period?
That's actually a good question. Just to give some background, Office of Finance back in 2008 had proposed a look-back period as a revenue opportunity to try to capture additional revenue that was not being reported to the city. In December of 2008, the council did approve the 8-year look-back period. The reason for that limitation of 8 years was, while city attorney did believe that there was legal authority to allow for an unlimited look-back period, they also realized that there were issues as far as what a court may determine to be an undue burden on taxpayers if the look-back period was unlimited. And that would have been in regards to a taxpayer having to maintain records for a lengthy period, let's say 10, 15 years. So what was proposed and what was eventually passed by the council in December 2008 was an 8-year look-back period. And that was based on discussions that finance had with the city attorney as far as what would be an appropriate look-back period.
But sorry, and maybe I'm missing this. If they're not registered and not filed, these are not businesses that are operating as a legitimate taxpayer. These are businesses that are operating in a way that's defrauding the city of Los Angeles. Yeah. So why is it that we have any legal concern whatsoever about burden that there may be on businesses that are entirely illegal in the city of Los Angeles.
Right. No, I completely understand your question and your concern. Once again, in our discussions with the city attorney, they did not believe that the city would be successful if we had a unlimited look-back period. They did not feel in their legal analysis that the courts would sustain a look-back period that was unlimited. And again, that was the analysis that they had provided to our office.
This is an issue that we can address in our report. I think that there's probably some room to follow up with the city attorney to dig a little bit deeper in their assessment of this. If the Franchise Tax Board and the IRS have an indeterminate time period as a charter city, at a minimum, you would expect that that would be something we could do as well. So I will take a further look at that.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if I may ask one other question. A few of the, all but one of these four proposals has the practical impact of reducing the statute of limitations and therefore reducing the look-back period and expediting the, incentivizing a faster enforcement period, let's say. Would any of these under the BTEC proposal apply retroactively? So in other words, we have businesses now that are delinquent in the millions of dollars to the city of Los Angeles, and that delinquency has accrued over the course of many years. If these proposals were enacted, would there be risk of losing the opportunity to collect on some of those stale delinquencies because the statute of limitations is now shorter and the look-back period is now shorter?
Well, I believe that could be addressed in the drafting of the particular ordinances by the city attorney, so that definitely would be an area that we certainly would want to ensure was discussed and was included in any final ordinances, as we obviously do have extensive collection issues and cases that have already gone forward.
We don't have the BTEC representatives here, so we're not getting their understanding of why they would want the statute of limitations on those who hadn't registered and have been operating completely illegally. So can either of you ponder a guess as to why?
It's not presented in their report an explanation of the 6 years, and we do need to do some follow-up on that point. Reducing that from 8 years to 6 years was something of a surprise to me, because it does create a situation where businesses can say, hey, I could have waited 8 years, and I'm taking the risk that I'm going to wait 8, and now I can only wait 6 years, and I'm really going to be incentivized to take that risk. So I think that's problematic. So I think we do need to do additional follow-up with BTEC on that point.
I think the way it works is that once you get to the 6th year, you sort of maximize your penalty. So you can continue to operate illegally until they catch you.
Exactly.
Whereas if it continues to grow, then there's still an incentive to get them to file. So I'm trying to figure out. And do we have any idea what kinds of businesses we're talking about?
Well, this would apply to all taxpayers.
I know it applies to all taxpayers, but where are we likely to find these kinds of businesses? Is it recycling centers?
No, BTEC didn't identify specific businesses. As far as our experience, delinquencies and underpayments occur, across the board. There is no one particular type of activity that predominates delinquencies versus another. Obviously, there are certain cash-based businesses that there are issues at all levels with accurate reporting. But as far as one particular type of industry, obviously parking activities is a cash-based business, so there is a potential for underpayments there, as well as other similar cash-based businesses.
I'm just talking about this specific category, non-registered and non-filing.
Well, that would be across the board in terms of we discover businesses.
But you're not going to find like a McDonald's restaurant.
No, basically on a lot of non-registered businesses, we're talking about service-based industries.
Like, I'm just trying to,
Well, it can run the gamut from independent contractors providing different types of services, contracting services, legal
are these
services.
the ones where you get those funny letters that all these people were getting these letters, including somebody on my staff who,
Well, we have an AB 63 program where we do send out based on information that we obtain from the Franchise Tax Board. And that deals specifically with independent contractors as well as other
is
types
that
of
the one
businesses.
my wife got a letter?
Um,
It was, she's got a DB, but it was sent to her. So no wonder they couldn't get her. I mean, she's not the business.
I believe someone in the office was looking at that.
Is that what you're talking about? That
That's
letter?
our AB 63 program,
So-
correct.
Oh, okay. I can understand, well, I don't understand, I think what we want to, maybe you can ask them,
Mhm.
what is the logic behind that? Because I'm having a tough time as my colleague is. Okay, okay, so we don't have to go into these in great detail. I think are you going to be taking positions on these? You're going to be negotiating, or not negotiating, but offering modification suggestions?
Yes, once we receive the CLA report, we will review it and also have further discussions as far as
How long
providing.
will that take?
I think that could be, depending on what the item is, I think it can be done relatively quickly, within a matter of weeks, once we receive each final item.
'Cause I do have a statute of limitations.
Understood. Well, we will.
Term limits.
We will make every effort to turn it around as quickly as possible, working with the other members.
Well, when we do have the CLA's report, I'm hoping that it's vetted by you and by BTAC, so that we could have a vibrant discussion about, what are the pros and cons of each of these proposals.
Yeah, definitely.
See, that's what I'm worried about is, will everybody be ready in 1 week?
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and schedule it, but I'd like to get through this as quickly as possible, even if it's in part, like, you don't have a problem with this one, maybe we send that one through.
Right.
And but if there's something that's much more difficult, we can hold on to it.
Right, definitely. I think there will be some items that we can provide feedback relatively quickly. There could be other items that are much more complex that would take further analysis.
Okay, well,
But our intent,
Adam, you can be ready to bifurcate this file somehow. Maybe we just do it as a committee report, and
I'm sorry?
we can just send it out as a committee report, but the council file is still the same, and we need to retain it for,
Well,
we will have to figure that out when we come.
yeah, because it's either got to go all forward or stay. You can't tear it in two and hold that part of it back, unfortunately.
We can figure it out. I'm confident that we can figure that out. Okay, so I don't need for you to go through all of these since you don't have recommendations on every one of them. But thank you for the matrix. It makes things very much simpler for people like me. And then, but more importantly, we want to get to your recommendations. If you have recommendations on some of these that you think should go through, we'd like to hear that as well. We don't need for the CLA to do heavy analysis if we don't need it.
oh, definitely, and we have weighed in, for example, there have been some proposals that we've already provided feedback, such as posting our training manuals on the website. We provided feedback. We've actually met with two of the subcommittees to provide our feedback as far as their proposals, and we will continue to do so.
Okay.
Yeah, and we are working with Office of Finance in doing our analysis, so they won't be surprised when our report comes out.
Yeah, I'm not
So,
interested in going through every one of these proposals in detail. Are you
No.
satisfied? I just wanted to get a sense of how this goes. What's this? So those are discretionary, or they can? Recommendations. Marissa's just telling me that the Office of Finance is already moving forward with 2 of the recommendations.
We move forward with some as far as, for example, the training manual, we have moved forward. We're working on updating that, and
Those
there's,
things that are within your authority.
yes, those items that we can change within our policies, we're taking action on those.
Okay, great. Yeah, we would need a report on that as well. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So 2 weeks, we'll schedule it, and then we'll see where we stand then. I think it would be most helpful to have a BTAC representative here to, we sort of need a sounding board.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
This is very helpful analysis.
Very
Thank you
helpful.
very much
Thank
for
you.
laying it out this way.
Item number 3.
Item number 3 is the city clerk report relative to the Larchmont Village Business Improvement District's 2010 fiscal year annual planning report.
These are fairly standard. We had a whole bunch of these go through, I believe, in the last committee meeting, and we didn't raise any issues with them, so
All right, Miranda Pastor, City Clerk.
maybe now that you present, we will, I don't know.
Right, their standard housekeeping report. It's a standard report required by all property-based bids pursuant to the state law. And they basically are reporting what they're planning to do with their assessment funds for this fiscal year pursuant to their management district plan.
I thought that was an outstanding presentation, so with no objection, that matter is approved.
Thank you.
Sorry to make you wait so long. With that, this meeting is adjourned.
Chair,
No further comments?
is Councilman Gregorian approved for item 1? So you can-
Are you okay with the appointments to the whip?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Then he concurs on that.
Now we're adjourned.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned.